I'll call to order the Tuesday, May 31st informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Welcome to all of you. I hope you had a nice holiday weekend. We'll start with a report from our City Clerk, Chief of Council Operations, Deborah Owen.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. A couple of updates just to remind you that there's an email about the elected officials workshop in July 14th. Please respond if you plan to attend that meeting. That is simply an up and back that day, and so we will leave early, come back late. There'll be no overnight. And then the candidates for the district commission are being sorted through. I think we're still missing one from the central district, but I think we'll have that available for the council to sign off and approve by resolution, so we can begin work on that redistricting of our city sometime in late June. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any questions for Deborah? If not, we'll go on to a report of the Audit Committee. Councillor Jameson.
To our
Can't.
Can you hear me now? Better? Okay. As I was saying, as a child, I was, no wait. All right, okay, we added a new member to our audit committee. His name is Jason Forbes. He's a CPA, and by charter or by ordinance, I believe it is, we need to have a CPA on the audit committee, and we do have that. He replaced Brad Witzel, who had served as our chair for a long time, so we welcome Jason. We did select a new committee chairman. Councillor Jameson was selected as chair, and so I'll be serving as chair for a while. A couple other items we discussed is that we're sending out an RFP for an external audit services. This is an annual audit that's done to the city. It's been done by Ike Bailey over the years, but the term of the last contract had expired, so we had to issue a new RFP. So that's in the works. We discussed a fraud hotline activity, which I believe Rich is giving us an update here shortly on. A couple other items that are audits that are in the works are a cash handling by the police department, a street department audit, and an arena audit. And look for those reports to be finalized and presented in July, the next audit committee, which is July 26th. Other than that, Rich was planning on going on a trip to learn a little more about auditing, and we approved that for him to go. Otherwise, that's it. If you have any questions or comments about the audit committee, let me know. Thank you.
Any questions for Councillor Jameson? If not, we'll go on to City Council open discussion. Councillor Erpenbach.
I have a couple of things. Thank you, Councillor Aguilar. First of all, there was a publication this weekend that listed all of our phone numbers in the local newspaper, and so I would just remind citizens that the phone numbers for all City Council members are on the website at siouxfalls.org, and they would be correct on the website, and I'd appreciate that you go there and get your phone numbers for contacting us. The other couple of things I wanted to highlight were today I was at a groundbreaking for Raven Industries, and they're adding an 80,000 square foot manufacturing facility that will employ 190 people. And as we were at that groundbreaking in the 50-mile-an-hour winds, I'll have you know, that Raven talked about the folks from Ravens talked about the idea that they have in the last year created 200 new jobs. And so I wanted to I planted that idea of, we've talked about it here at Council, that idea of economic gardening, and this is a prime example of that's what these folks are doing. They have been in this community since the 1950s, and they're doing some amazing things. They are growing job opportunities for us, and that's the whole point of economic gardening, in addition to building manufacturing facilities. And then for my colleagues, there will be an invitation coming to us from the folks at Eros Data Imaging, who out north of town. I went to an event with they had 15 countries represented, scientists from all over the world who have use the data imaging from the satellites that are programmed from AROS. And they're talking about the idea, again, of economic development through that organization. But currently the Department of Interior has 200 different sites that are like AROS that are gathering information from satellites, and they're going to reduce that number from 200 to 5. And AROS has been pre-selected to be one of those, but they are not guaranteed to be one of those. There are hundreds of jobs out there, and they're doing some amazing things in terms of adding to our economy in Sioux Falls. And so I would just give you the heads up, Council, that there will be an invitation for us to go out and tour and to learn more about AROS and to create some better relationships with those folks, and that they're also going to include some other elected officials from around the area. So just watch your email for that. I'm going to help coordinate that, and I'd appreciate you participating. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions for Councilor Erpenbach? Any other open discussion? Councilor Jameson.
I just wanted to update the council on my kind of a public open house that I had last Wednesday at the Carnegie Hall. I had about 50 people show up. We had 3 councilors show up. Councilor Karski, Councilor Aguilar, and Councilor Brown all showed up. But the interesting note I'll just share real quickly was that the first question I asked this group is, who all thinks we need an event center? And half the group said yes, the other half said no. And then when you add in the idea of downtown or the arena site, half of the people who wanted an event center, half of them were turned off by either location. And I guess what I gathered from this meeting was that I still believe there's a tremendous amount of education that needs to occur. The public is not at the same level of understanding as we are on this whole issue, and we know all the details inside and out, but the public does not. And there was a lot of misinformation out there and thoughts about certain issues, but in the end, when we got done, it lasted an hour and a half. The question was asked whether they wanted to have this happen again, another meeting, and the whole room erupted with yes. So it appears as though they're really hungry for more of this kind of a dialogue, a conversation, so to speak, about the event center. So I'm committed to doing another one, but I would encourage the rest of you to do it in your districts. And the at-large guys should join us, or should join some of the district guys so that you have one, or do your own. But I guess I just want to encourage the rest of the counselors to reach out and try to do this. I think it was very informative for me. The people who were there appreciated it, so I think it'd be good.
Councilor Erpenbach.
I appreciate you doing that, Councilor Jameson. The thing that I wanted to add to it, my question for you first was, do you feel like you had enough information to give to folks? Were you able to get beyond the numbers and the things that we don't necessarily have? Did that work?
Well, the way the format was set up was I wasn't there to inform them of anything, really. I was there just to listen to them and try to figure out where they were in this whole topic. You know, we've moved along pretty fast up here, but I wanted to know where they were. And there's a lot of questions they have, things that would be easily understood or easily thought that everybody would understand it, but they still don't have it. So my intention was really just to listen, not to tell them the answers as I see them or the numbers as they are studied. It's really just to listen. So I think that's what they appreciated the most, was just that I was there listening. Sure, there were people who were mad about the arena site, mad about the downtown site, mad about traffic, lots of things like that, streets and other things. And I made a whole list of all their concerns, but I was there just to listen.
Good, thank you. The Central District will be having one at some point, but I was kind of nervous about the not having enough numbers. We have certainly some numbers, but I don't feel like we have, especially those financing numbers that are so important. So that was why I haven't been putting it off, but that is part of it. So thank you.
Anyone else for City Council open discussion? If not, I have a tentative date for our next work session. Thank you to those of you that sent me those days that you're going to be away. I did share those with the city clerk's office. What we're looking at is our next work session on Thursday, June 16th, from 4 to 6 p.m. And I would appreciate if anyone has a conflict that has arisen since you sent me the information to let me know as soon as possible. But it looks like it's a busy month for most of the council, so the only date that I could see other than a Friday would be Thursday the 16th, 4 to 6 p.m. All right. If there's no other City Council open discussion, we'll go on to our presentations. Park and Rec Needs Assessment Survey Final Report. Director Kearney.
Good afternoon, council members. Don Kearney with Parks and Rec. This past January, we did embark on a new recreation needs assessment that we wanted to conduct for our community, and we're pleased to share with you that we have completed that needs assessment, and in a minute we'll share those major findings with you. As a reminder, the last needs assessment was completed in 2000, and the recommendations from that needs assessment have really largely been implemented over the course of the last 10 to 12 years. The needs assessment that was conducted in 2000 really was a valuable tool for us, both from a planning perspective, but it also helped us identify what our operational and capital priorities should be. And here today with us is Ananda Mitra. Ananda is with Management Learning Laboratories. Ananda is also professor at Wake Forest University in communications, and his firm specializes in conducting recreation needs assessment, and their firm has completed over 100 of these recreation needs assessments over the last 20 years. Ananda also completed the recreation needs assessment that was completed back in 2000, and so today he'll also be able to compare the attitudes and opinions of our community from 2000 and contrast that with what they think in 2011. And before I would get started, I would also like to acknowledge our staff, Alicia Luther. Alicia is our recreation manager who really coordinated the efforts of working with Ananda to get everything in place to get this conducted, as well as Dave Fisher, Kelby Maris, and Tori Miedema. Key staff members are also contributed to the final product here today. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ananda.
Thank you, Don. Members of the City Council, can you hear me okay? Yeah. What I'd like to do, I've been told I have about 30 minutes, and we're going to go through a set of slides. And I'm happy to take questions as we go through the slides, or if you want to wait till the end, it's totally up to you. Before we get started with the slides, a little bit of background in terms of the study in 2001. That study was done using a methodology that was basically duplicated in 2011 so that the two data sets have some comparability, and that is really important in a situation like this. The study in 2011 involved a questionnaire which had about 200 different questions in it. I'm not going to take your time going through every single one of those responses to the 200 questions. I believe you have a copy of the final report or will have one available, and that report does, yes sir, that report does list in the several tables the responses to each one of the questions that we asked. What I will accomplish, or hope to accomplish in the next 25-30 minutes is an overview of what we did and what some of our major findings are. You probably have a copy of the slideshow as well. On the last 4 slides of the slideshow, we have listed all the recommendations that resulted from the data. I want to say I'm not going to go through those recommendations. That would be just reading from the slides. You can take a look at the recommendations, but those are based on data that we collected. With that said, Alicia, if you can go to the next slide, please. Just very briefly about our method. I was here in Sioux Falls several months ago doing focus group meetings. One of the things that we decided on in consultation with the Rec Department is that we were not simply going to use the 2001 questionnaire. In the last 10 years, things have changed significantly in Sioux Falls, and I recommended that we actually try and develop a new instrument for data collection. Now, albeit that instrument will have similarities with the 2001 instrument. So I was here running focus groups, and I ran several focus groups, and I must thank Alicia again for organizing those focus groups, which went really well. And I do recognize some faces here who were at those focus group meetings, and I remember lively conversations. What resulted out of the focus groups was a new instrument, which had, as I said, similarities with the old one. Once that instrument was signed off on by everybody involved in the study, it was mailed out to a random sample of addresses in Sioux Falls. The listing of addresses did not generate out of Sioux Falls. It did not generate out of Management Learning Laboratories. It was from a vendor who just does unbiased random samples. We mailed out 6,000 questionnaires. About 96% of those mailings were deliverable, which means that 4% came back undeliverable, which is not unusual with U.S. mail. In the end, we have about 925 responses back, which are usable responses, that resulted in a response rate of 15.7%. I should put a footnote to that this response rate of 15.7% is about 1 percentage point lower than what was achieved in 2001. However, this is quite a bit higher than what is being achieved in other studies. Sioux Falls turned out to be a far more responsive community than many other communities that I'm working with. So even though the number 15.7 appears to be a little low, it is very much within the expected specs of mail data collection process with a single reminder that was used in the study. The 925 that came back, we matched those with standard census data. We had demographic information on that data set. And by and large, we were pretty close to the standard census. So we feel from MLL fairly confident that the data that we are presenting to you in the rest of the report is relatively representative of the community at large. And I do want to make the point that these respondents represent the general population and not an interest group. Councilman Jamison's example of the meeting that you just described is something that needs to follow the data that we have collected, because that's a really important activity where some of the people who are more interested can now look at this data and comment on the data related to the event center or anything else that the data has produced. But what we did here was a general population study, which is why some of the data that you see might not gel with some of the things you might be hearing from the community as you talk to them, who often represent more of a self-selected group. Let's go to the next slide. Once the data was collected, we did an aggregate analysis of the adult data set. I do want to make the point that this is an aggregate analysis, which means we took the whole 925. We did not divide it up by age, by gender, and so forth. So all of the numbers that I'm going to be talking about today came from the entire group of 925. We interpreted the data and we produced a set of database recommendations, which are actually listed, as I said earlier, all through the report and then summarized in the end of the slideshow as well as at the end of the report, and actually in the executive summary as well. Would you like to pause here if you have any questions about the process before we go into the major findings? Okay, next slide, please. And the next slide, please. One of the things that we are interested in is finding out from the general population, again, what are the different kinds of facilities and programs that the respondents participated in the past 12 months before the study. As you can see from the data, there is a certain, there's a consistency here. Parks, trails appear to be pretty strong, and we would appreciate if you keep that in mind as we go through the other slides, because a story unfolds here, so to speak. A narrative takes place. Like parks, picnic shelters were pretty popular, and these numbers represent the percent of people who actually said they've been at least once to these places. There are more variegated amount, more granulated information is available when the data is analyzed further. The existing municipal community center, athletic complexes, and outdoor aquatic facilities also showed up, where more than half the people had said that they had actually been to one of those places in the past year. Next slide, please. One thing that becomes very clear in studies like this, and having done literally more than 100 of these studies, I encourage cities to find out what are the factors that influence participation. Are there specific barriers, things that encourage participation? As you can tell here, the key barrier, of course, is lack of information. We'll talk about that momentarily, but the other two barriers that are very popular and do show up in this study as well is I do not have the time and inconvenient timing of events. As a sidebar, I would say that not having the time or not being interested is something that the city can do very little about, whereas the city might be able to do something about the inconvenient timing of events, and we did collect data on that issue. Lack of information is nationwide either the first or second reason for lack of participation in public recreation. Does not necessarily mean that the city is doing an inefficient job of it, but it does mean that there are perhaps some strategies that can be tweaked a little bit to get the information out more efficiently. Competing activities is something that we saw in the 2001 study as well, and it did show up again in the 2011 studies, and I have made a recommendation in my previous presentation to the park board that there might be some further conversations about that, particularly in the kind of groups that Councilman Jamieson just talked about. What are the competing activities? What are other people doing outside of the public recreation opportunities? Next slide, please. So given the fact that inconvenient timing of events turned out to be such an important issue, and it did show up in the meetings, here we did ask people to tell us what did they feel were the best times for them to participate. And again, using 50% as somewhat of an arbitrary cutoff point, as you can tell, weeknights, 6 to 8, is actually one of the top times. Interestingly enough, Saturday night does not show up in that list, neither does Sunday, but Sunday afternoon. The way this information can be used by the city is it's a simple tweaking of when things are offered. You know, if you're seeing that there are fewer things being offered at that period in time, perhaps making that available would encourage people to come, which will also have an effect on the lack of information issue, because those two things go hand in hand. If you don't show up, you don't get to learn about what's going on, and that kind of becomes a cycle. Next slide, please. Communication, we did want to test what would be effective ways of getting the word out. And interestingly, this is a community which, being a professor of communication, I found this quite heartening that 60% of the respondents felt that newspapers should still be used for getting the word out, which is increasingly disappearing, or is losing its popularity particularly among the younger people. But clearly, traditional media, TV or radio, and newspapers. Direct mailers to households is an all-time favorite for all recreation agencies, and that still continues to be an important one. The next two, email and city website, we did not test this in the 2001 study because it was not something we thought would be important to test. But what we're really seeing is 40% are saying both of those are ways of getting the word out, and that's where the tweaking comes in. As we know, as we collect the email information from participants or registrants, and as more email information becomes readily available, that is surely an inexpensive and sometimes an efficient way of getting word out about specific activities. So I'd strongly encourage following that route. Flyers in public places, this community is no different from the others I've worked in. Works up to a degree, but is not the most efficient one. Moving on, we had in the questionnaire a series of questions which were designed as testing the opinion and attitudes of the respondents regarding a variety of things. The way this was tested was by giving them statements like the ones that you see on the screen, and they were asked to respond and say whether they either strongly agreed, disagreed, or strongly disagreed with that statement, or if they did not have enough information to say anything about it. What you see there is something I have not seen in a study like this for a long time, which is the first three items. After you factor in sampling error, 3 to 5%, essentially what we are saying, all the respondents had a strong opinion about the fact that they're satisfied with the facilities that they visit, that the facilities are well maintained, and that they're clean. This is not something you see very often, and I really applaud the city for being able to generate that form of a response, particularly when this is a general population study and does not include just users. So the message there is you guys are doing a good job. That's the simple language message. But as we will see, there's also a demand for more of the good stuff, which is also not unusual. What would have been unfortunate if this was only that you need to do better and we did not get this endorsement that we have received. Notice that trails come right back up here. 83% are happy with the trails, and they're 73% with the playground equipment and so forth. So basically what we are seeing is a fairly strong, positive opinion concerning the facilities that we have now. If you would move on, please. Thank you. We also had items that dealt with programs and what people felt about the programs. Here, too, we get a fairly, if you look at particularly the second item over there, we get a fairly strong endorsement, which is not quite as strong as with the facilities, but we are getting a fairly strong endorsement in terms of programmatic issues. The first item there is curious and important to note. This is the part of the narrative that I'm trying to develop. Trails, natural spaces, going to parks. This is a community that likes to do that. And that's why 84% come out and agree with the statement that I go to parks to enjoy nature. So I think once we start to realize that, we can start to design our services and your services in a manner that meets that particular aspect of this community. Moving on to the next slide, please. We did have a couple of questions about administrative opinions. 73% felt that the staff is courteous and helpful. When you look at the report, you will also note that while 73% strongly agreed with the statement, there was a very small proportion, probably under 10%, who actually disagreed with that. So the ratio of agree to disagree is extremely high. So many more people agree to that. So don't only look at the 73% as an absolute number, but also look at the ratio. The awareness issue comes right back, so there's a balance over there. Only 70% are agreeing with that, and there are people who need that information out in front of them a little bit more. We will skip this slide. This is a slide that got in there by mistake. We had questions about two things regarding finances. On one hand, we wanted to know how satisfied they are with the financial operations of the unit and how they felt things should be funded. Generally speaking, the second item in that list is encouraging. I'm willing to pay user fees, because once you get into that area, you're basically in a situation where you're saying that, look, we can start to charge some amount of user fees. Among the rest of the items on that slide, I would draw your attention to items, one that says corporate sponsorship, and the other one is the enterprise operations. I've been doing studies like this for the past nearly 20, 25 years, and one thing that I've noticed that has changed, and I see the change here too, is the community is more sympathetic towards seeing private corporation logos and so forth in what is public recreation. So it is not a bad idea to seriously consider, if you're doing a special event, a concert in the park, to go to a local corporation when you talk about Raven or you talk about other such major corporations in the community. That is an opportunity for them to advertise, and they can come in and sponsor part of it. Enterprise operations is also becoming more popular, little concession stands and so forth. So I think those are opportunities that are ahead of the city to be utilized. Next slide, please. In the end, we had questions about top needs. There were questions related to facility needs and questions related to programmatic needs. What you see here are the programmatic needs. Concerts in parks, and I'm not just going to read through this, but what you'll start to see is there is a park-based, the park-centric programs that people are interested in. You also start to see some of the arts and crafts activities that are of interest, and those percentages are those who said, yes, I would like to see more of this. Let me explain the numbers next to those ratios. what those show is what is the ratio of people who said user fees or taxes should support it. So if you take the first one, for instance, concerts in parks, essentially half the people said taxes should pay for it, half the people said user fees. So that's a balance. If you go further down into adult education, what you're seeing there, well, let's go to the next one. The math is simpler with dining along the river. 25% of the respondents said taxes should support it, and 75% said user fees. So essentially, if you're saying that, look, if you're going to do dining by the river, you better charge some money to those who want to come and dine. And that's the simple answer, and I think that's an important answer for programmatic decisions as well as financial decisions on how you want to charge things. Going on to the next slide, please. These are the interests related to facilities. And here again, you see the story continuing to unfold with this emphasis on trails, connected trails, natural areas, all of the things that related to nature and to some degree exercise and doing things outdoors. One thing to note here too is the ratios on the side. It is important to remember at this point that when folks usually respond to these questions, they're talking about use fees. So, for example, if you go down to the indoor aquatic center, 1:7, or in other words, 12% are saying that it should be tax-based, and 88% are saying it, or 84% are saying it should be user fee-based, they're not talking about building it. They're talking about how they want that to be operated. That's typically how, from our studies, we know that's how people are saying. So the message there is if you're going to do an indoor aquatic center, there should be a user fee to use that. And given the other finding, in the other part of the study, that people are willing to pay user fees, I think there's an opportunity there. Not necessarily just with the indoor aquatic center, but if you look at how some of the other, well, that's one of the ones that pops out most significantly in that category. But that's basically the message that's coming out there. This brings us now. These slides are going to be a little difficult to read, but I'm going to summarize this. What we ended up doing is we looked at the 2000 report and the 2000 information and the 2001, and there's some similarities and some differences as you would expect. The first item deals with special events. Special events were important 10 years ago. They continue to remain important now. Bike trails were important 10 years ago. They continue to remain important even today. So the community has changed and has not changed in some ways. Computing activities was important then as a barrier, and it continues to be an important barrier even today. Going on, publicity included brochures and direct mail and newspaper advertising. Same story. The only difference is now we have the internet starting to play a role in that getting the information out. Now, the next one is I found quite curious that 10 years ago people said that people were available for recreation between 7 and 10 p.m. It appears now they have shifted their time a little bit and they're available between 6 and 8. Wonder what is going on after 8 o'clock with the invasion of the screen in the home with television and the internet and Facebook and so forth. Probably people are going back to that, but that's one shift that was quite visible. The positive quality of the assessment of what the city does has actually increased, which is really quite heartening to know, to realize that 10 years later, whereas we had 87, 78, and 72% agreeing to those similar statements, now we have almost an entire group agreeing to that. So something's working. The number of people willing to pay user fees has gone up from 57% to a slightly higher number now, which too could have some impact on how you make decisions at this point. And the youth orientation of programs, which was a strong opinion in 2001, has shifted a little bit, and people do not feel that it's only youth oriented anymore. The next 4 slides, and I'm not going to talk through these. These are things that you can look at in your time. Are all the recommendations from the study, and every single recommendation has been supported by the data, and our experience in looking at data similar to this. So with that, I conclude my presentation. It's open for questions.
Questions from the council? Councilor Rolfing.
Thank you for the report. I'm wondering why you skipped that one page on financial opinions.
That is because it accidentally came in from another study. Let's go back to that page. Actually, there's something interesting about that page. All right. This is actually, I'll tell you what city it is from. I remember this right. This is I can't tell you the city exactly, but this is from a city in Montana. Notice what we asked the same question. I'm willing to pay reasonable user fees. In that city, 59% said yes, but your city said much higher. It was literally a wrong slide. While we were doing this, it got inserted. But similar questions. I feel the department needs more funding to better serve the community. We did not ask this question in your community, but those are the kinds of results from accidentally you get to see from another city. But clearly, this city is more willing to pay user fees.
Interesting. Other questions? Councilor Jameson.
Yes, thank you for the report. It's very good stuff. I think it reflects well on the Parks and Rec Department and how they do their job and how they've been doing their job over the years, that people are satisfied with what they're getting. This indoor pool idea, indoor aquatic center, you refer to it as, if I was a private developer and I wanted to build my own indoor pool and rent it out to individuals to come in, am I hearing you right that there's a willingness by the public to pay an appropriate fee to come in there and swim? So if the city did this, if city had an indoor pool, the residents would be willing to pay a fee to come in and swim over and above just a nominal fee that you might pay at an outdoor pool.
Right. That's what the data is telling us, 1:7 on that particular item. That's one of the items where it's as large a ratio as that. 7 times more people said, I'm willing to pay a user fee to come in and use the indoor aquatic facility. And, as we all know, surveys are good tools, but they are not, it's still looking into a crystal ball to some degree, but with some more intelligence and information than completely guessing. So with that said, I would say, I would have to follow the data here.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
I am not an incredible numbers person, but I wanted to ask you a couple numbers questions. And I also appreciate you coming and walking us through this. This is one of those reports that we enjoy because of all the good things that we hear about our folks. This is great stuff. When we look at the attendance at facilities and participation in programs, and then it's sort of the beginning of several slides where you're doing the percentage thing, and the percentages don't add up to 100%. Can you talk about how those questions were asked and then
absolutely.
explain how that works?
Sure. One of the things that, go back to the slide she's talking about.
It's like the fourth, 1, 2, 3, maybe the fourth or the fifth slide is the first one like that.
Go back. There. That's the one. Okay. You have to understand that each one of those items, let's say regional parks, the way we ask this question is, I'm not remembering the exact language, but the intent was, in the past 12 months, how often have you gone to a regional park? And we actually put in parentheses some examples of regional parks. The respondent could say never, once in the past 12 months, 2 to 4 times, 5 to 7 times, and so forth and so on. That 88% are people who said they have been there at least once in terms of a regional park. So if you're adding the percentages downwards, they'll never add to 100. These are different questions in the questionnaire, and those are the numbers. So all we know here is regional parks have been visited more frequently than the outdoor aquatic facilities. That's the ranking, and those percentages provide the ranking. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely it does, and I'm glad that you used that particular example because it's important for us to understand how our facilities are being used by the population.
Yes, and that's what it is saying. Now, there are 2 parts to this story, though. One is, this is what the people are self-responding in the questionnaire. Now, if you go to the outdoor aquatic facility, and this I'm completely making up as I'm going, or this is speculation, you might find that the outdoor aquatic facility is at capacity all the time. which really means if you know that fact, and we know that 55% have been there only once, you're in real trouble if that number went up to 65%. And that number could go up to 65% if you started to promote it. So all of these pieces of information are linked together. So it is at capacity. Half the people are going there. We don't have any more place to put people who are coming in. We start promoting it. We have over-marketed something we can't provide. You see, that's the challenge that you start to face, which is why you really need to go through this report. I'd strongly encourage you to go through this report and keep linking the information together and see what could be the consequences of tweaking some of these things.
If I might continue just for a minute, really just a couple of comments. And you noted it, but I wanted to say it again, that idea that 15.7% response is amazing. I've done just enough surveys in my other job that 3% is astronomical, and we got 15%, really. That's incredible, and I want to thank the citizens of Sioux Falls for really being interested in this. And then a question for you then, based on, and I could have looked back and I didn't, but based on the 2000 study and this study, is this the first time we've seen really more indications toward private fundraising?
Yes. Yes.
Did we ask about that previously? I'm sorry.
I think we asked that question, but not quite in the way we asked it this time. But this is a good question, and let me digress for just a second. One of the things we offer at the end of a study like this is our group is open to answer questions such as that, which will invariably come up as you read the report. That needs to go to Alicia. She's my point of contact. And we can answer those questions by going back to the older report, which I don't have in my mind right now. But yes, I think what we are seeing in the 2011 data is, yes, there is a support for private companies to come in. But if you have other questions, which I cannot answer right now, I am available to respond to those on an ongoing basis.
Good, thank you. My other questions really were for Director Kearney, if that's a possibility later in the discussion. Okay. But is everyone done with?
What do you have?
Is everyone done with this gentleman?
Yes,
is my question.
I think so.
Okay. Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
So dovetailing on that question then, Don, is do we have plans? Have we considered private fundraising opportunities, or do we already do that kind of thing?
I would say from a facility development standpoint, we've been very fortunate to be able to get contributions from the private sector. One of the things that I don't think we've done a lot of, and maybe purposeful, just based on past practice, is not really tap the corporate sponsorships for some of our programming. We do have some examples. For example, our summer track meets are sponsored, and so that's an example of how we have used it. But certainly the potential, it sounds like, is out there for some more corporate sponsorship of those programs.
And I guess it's been my experience that we've kind of just had things fall in our lap, blessings from above almost, and so many of those gifts have just been amazing, and we've used them in amazing ways. And so I guess this to me then says that maybe we need to take that next step and say, hey, corporate folks, step up, that kind of thing. Then I just had two comments that I just wanted you to hear, Don. One was that I note very loud and clear that the indoor year-round multi-use facility is popping up again in this survey. I think we need to be real conscious of that, and I think my colleagues need to be real conscious of that on the council. And then the other thing, and you know this well and you're doing it well, is the idea that citizens are looking for and asking for affordable recreation that everyone can participate in, and the opportunities are just waiting there for them. And so I just appreciate, again, the work that you guys have done, and that this is telling us amazing things. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you all. Okay, we'll go on to internal audit report. Lead internal auditor, Rich Oxel.
Good afternoon, City Council. We've shared this report already with the Audit Committee, and now we're presenting it to the full Council. This is the very first report we've ever done on the fraud hotline. This has been around since 2008. My very first project as lead internal auditor was to do a fraud risk assessment back in, I believe it was 2007. And as part of that report to the council, based upon our research, we recommended that the City Council appropriate money for a fraud hotline service. And that council at that time did that, and we entered into a contract with the network to provide that service. Sometimes cities or counties will just have a dedicated phone line that is answered by a city employee. I've seen that in some local governments. It's not the recommended way to do it, though. The problem is that a lot of employees won't call during normal hours. They would want to call on the weekend or in the evening, and therefore, you'd end up having to leave a voicemail, and city employees probably wouldn't feel comfortable leaving just a voicemail for a report such as this. So the recommended practice is to hire a company. And when a call comes in, it can be answered 24/7. There's a trained operator that will answer that call and get as much information as possible from the caller, and then relay that information typically by email to the local government so they can do a follow-up. As I said, it was about I think February of 2008, I believe, is when we went live with the hotline. So we've had it for a number of years now. We pay about $1,750 per year, and that's based upon the number of employees we have. And the company that we use is one of the largest providers of this sort of service in the United States, and they're based in Georgia. And one of the reasons we recommended this was because of the research that's been done by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. When they've done surveys of corporate America and government agencies, they find that organizations that have a hotline system in place, they reduce their fraud risk, or at least their fraud losses by about 59%. And the number one way that fraud or wrongdoing is discovered is by tips, in other words, by a hotline. Audits come in after that, but the number one way is an employee or an insider that knows something, and they make a call. And at the bottom of page 2, I said, what are employees asked to report? Well, a number of things. Illegal or fraudulent conduct, waste of city funds, abuse of city property, neglect of duty, gross neglect of duty. They're told not to use the hotline for just general complaints or personnel issues. It's not intended to be a substitute for talking with their supervisor or manager. And as far as the benefits, obviously deterrence of wrongdoing, it reinforces that perception of detection to any potential fraudsters, a strengthening of internal controls, and it's an indication to employees that management and elected officials take this seriously. And ways that we've found to make this hotline known is to put up these placards on employee break rooms. We try to make it a bright color. There's a lot of stuff that's on the employee break room bulletin boards, so you want to want it to stand out. And probably something we'll do in the future is change the color, maybe change the appearance every once in a while, because after a while you just sort of become numb to stuff that's on the bulletin board. You don't pay any attention to it. And we've also sent a letter out to the city employees. We did this. This letter was dated June 23rd of last year, and it was signed by the council chair, Greg Jameson, and Mayor Huther. And it was just a simple one-page letter that went out to everybody's home address. We got the database from HR, and it was just a real brief explanation of the hotline program, and gave the number and explained what the employees were asked to report on. And that's something we'll do periodically. So there's different ways to get the information out. Some communities or some local governments will send out little wallet cards. There's different ways to do it. This was a good way to do it that was relatively inexpensive. And then we also put the number on the city intranet, which is available to city employees, so they can locate the number there. As far as the activity to date, on page 3 there, you can see we haven't had a lot of calls, but we've had some calls. And one of the calls we got occurred right after this report was finished. It occurred about 3 weeks ago. We did an investigation. It was a confidential matter. It had to do with the personnel issue. Yeah, we did the, it's very sensitive. So we did the investigation, and then we discussed it with the audit committee in executive session. And we found no evidence for the allegations that were charged against the city employees. So, as far as the future, the audit committee talked briefly about making this available to the public. I asked the hotline service provider, the network, what that would cost. They said it would be $3,000 additional charges if we wanted to make that available to the public. So there's an additional cost, and that's I think it's based upon the population, based upon their experience. If there would be more activity, there would be more cost for that service. Some communities do that, some don't. It just kind of communities decide what they want to do as far as making a hotline available. The public does have other avenues that may not be available to employees. They can always call you or talk to the mayor or city council members. They don't have to worry about losing their job, certainly. That's not an issue with, say, with an employee. So that's a council decision, I guess, that if we want to make that available to the public. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time. So.
Questions for Rich? Councilor Jameson.
Not so much a question, but a comment that I think is worth saying. When this fraud hotline information was presented to Mayor Huther and his administration, he accepted it very willingly and was willing to put it wherever the audit committee thought it should go. So I just wanted to acknowledge that the administration was very receptive to the idea. It's not an easy thing to talk about when all you want to do is promote good things, but potentially there is fraud, and just wanted to acknowledge that the administration was very receptive.
Rich, so the total cost then would be the $1,750 plus the $3,000 then?
That's the way I understood it. It would be an additional $3,000 to have it available to the public. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Rich? Thanks, Rich.
Okay, thank you.
We next on the agenda, we need to go into executive session to prepare for contract negotiations. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved, Erpenbach.
Second, Jameson.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. We will now go into executive session.